art can mean different things to different people. For me, it's all about the joy of creativity. So if you draw, paint, write, dance, sing, craft, play air guitar, or even sculpt using nothing more than mashed potatoes, consider yourself an artist and join our conversation. For the next half hour, meet the artist and learn about their inspiration while we all enjoy the beauty of creativity. Welcome to Season 2 of Art Talk with John Cole Artist. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Art Talk with John Cole Artist. Today is Tuesday, April 23rd. I think I got the date right this time, Terry, because typically I forget the date. People get all confused. Couple announcements up front. First of all, I want to send out an apology to those folks that joined me last week, 2 weeks ago, actually, when I did my oil painting demonstration. I think the demonstration itself went reasonably well. However, I noticed after I watched the replay that the microphone I was using was brushing up against my apron the entire time. So every time I would move, static, static, static. But I learned a valuable lesson, folks. I will not be doing it that way again. So tonight I am so happy that Terri Hawke has agreed to join me. Terri is a animal communicator. She's a naturalist and she's a writer, and she's got an inventory of other fun things that really would make your head spin. She really is an incredible person. Terri, welcome to the program.
Thank you, John. I'm glad to be here.
Well, great. Yeah. And if I'm not mistaken, this is your first podcast, right?
Yeah.
That's amazing. I love it. I love it when that happens.
It makes it exciting.
Yeah. So I was wondering if you could start us off tonight by telling our audience a little bit more about yourself.
Well, there's a lot to talk about. However, we'll keep it short because we don't need to be here for hours. I am now a published author. I have written chapters in a couple of books. One of them is a kid's book, which is pretty exciting. And I'm going to be working on my own book pretty soon this year. Hopefully that'll be out at the end of the year. I often say I was born a naturalist because I've always been curious and amazed by the wonders of nature, always wanting to know more. That has never stopped as long as I can remember. And I spent all my time out in the woods in the marshes when I was a little kid, which was really great because later on when I was an adult, I got hired at, I spent 4 seasons with North Cascades National Park. All of these were seasonal jobs. Time with Washington State Parks, Seattle City Parks, and Edmonds City Parks, doing a lot of environmental education, and then being an interpretive naturalist, which means taking people out on walks and talking about what we're seeing, or doing, like for national parks, you're doing evening programs. Back in the day, it was reel slides.
Yes.
With real screens. The good old days. Yeah. About anything natural history wise, from grizzlies to plants to birds to whatever. It also meant giving programs about some subject in the middle of the day, or both Seattle and Edmonds. We did school groups doing forest ecology education and marine biology education. Those were some of my bestest favorite jobs that I had doing those, and being able to use my mostly self-taught skills in learning about natural history of our wonderful earth. More recently, a couple of years ago, after almost just 1 month short of 22 years, I retired from Snohomish County Public Works. I was what they call it a planner. I didn't plan a dang thing. We did a lot of permitting for bridge replacements and things like that, where there were wetlands or streams or, say, forests nearby that had threatened and endangered species. And I wrote a lot of technical documents and helped with doing mitigation. So if we damaged part of a wetland, we had to mitigate twice as much almost for that damage, planting and adding what do I want to say, habitat elements for wildlife. And even more recently, like in the last month or two, I've become the board chair for a nonprofit called Western Wildlife Outreach, where we teach people about how to coexist with predators like cougars, black bear, grizzly bear. Missing one. Oh yeah, my favorite, gray wolves. And that is really exciting because it's a great nonprofit, and it's just been kind of quiet for too long. And now that they have someone passionate about moving it along, I'm hoping we can really do some amazing stuff again.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. I mean, like truly wonderful. Anna Davis is on. She says, "Hi, John. Hi, Terry."
Hey, Anna.
Hi, Anna. Anna's actually got a book coming out here soon as well. I want to say it's in a few weeks, and I'm hoping to get Anna on the show maybe in 2 weeks if she's available, so that we could talk about her writing experience as well. So, yeah, I mean, that's some amazing stuff. Maybe we could start off a little bit talking about. We'll talk a little bit about the writing aspect because I've written some chapters in books, and of course I've got a book coming out May 7th. There's a little plug for that, by the way. It's coming out on May 7th. And I know that writing doesn't come naturally to everybody, and sometimes when you're writing something that's super vulnerable, or even if it's not, even technical writing, I think has its challenges. But how's your writing experience? I mean, do you find that it comes really natural for you, or do you struggle with it? And I'd just like to hear your thoughts about that.
I've been pretty lucky. It came naturally to me, but I also took classes. Sometimes they would be day-long classes or weekend, long class on creative writing, because that's what I love more than the technical writing. And once I learned to just let go and get out of my head, and not for technical writing, that one you got to get in your head.
That one you do, yes.
For
I know that well, yeah.
Yeah, you got to be in your head the whole time. Sorry, there's a cat. Cat tail, I love it. You've got to get into your heart and out of your head and just let go. Right? When I wrote the chapter for the kids' book recently, it was about losing what I call my heart cat, a soul cat, and what our relationship was when I lost my parents, and had him to comfort me, and then how I dealt with losing him. And when I wrote that, I discovered technology. I'm pretty good at it, but I don't know everything. I noticed on my laptop on Word, I could just dock into the computer.
Yeah.
And I did that. I just spewed it out. And then I went back and edited it. And it was like, whoa. Because I didn't think, right? I just talked at the computer with the sentences, and it worked out really well. So I feel quite grateful that it just comes naturally. And being able to do business writing, technical writing, creative writing, and creative writing really is what I always wanted to do. It just didn't pay the bills.
You mean, so when you're saying creative writing, what exactly? You're not talking fiction, right? You're talking the ability to take what you're thinking and put it out on paper, like autobiographical. Yeah.
Yeah, it would be nonfiction mostly. I'm not a fiction writer. I haven't tried that yet. It's something that I thought about. But creative writing, I would call what I've done, right? Stories, right. Autobiography, but taking your life and turning it into stories and things like that. Or like, I really would like to write a book about my experiences with wildlife over the years, right? I kind of creative writing, creative nonfiction. That's the way to put it.
Yeah, I don't know if I ever mentioned this on this program. I don't think I ever have, but this was just between you and me, Terry.
Okay.
I believe it or not, about 3 or 4 years ago, Jesus, it's been that long, I started to write a fiction novel. And I just thought the story was, because I had this plot in my head and I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. And I probably have maybe 20 or 30 pages written.
Cool.
But creative writing, when it comes to like fiction specifically, the problem that I keep running into is I don't read a lot of fiction.
Ah,
And when you don't read something, it's hard to write it. So, but that said, I still have this story in my head, and one of these days, mark my words, I will get that book out on paper. And it's a ghost story. It's a ghost story mixed with some
oh,
romance, mixed with some adventure. It's just I think it's a great idea.
fun.
Oh.
And that sounds fun. Well, the other thing that happened when I was a kid, I was always, always, always surrounded by books. Always. My parents, the Scholastic school thing, and would be selling all these little paperbacks, and they would let me order as many as I wanted. They really did well with allowing me to be surrounded by books. And I often think that helps with the type of writing and writing in general, right?
Yeah.
Because you're reading all that. And it's funny you say you don't read much fiction. I think it's been a little while now, but I started reading fiction. Normally, I read creative nonfiction and nonfiction books, but a couple years ago, especially, I started reading a lot of fiction, fantasy type, sci-fi, things like that, fiction books, which has been fun.
Yeah, I mean, I've read most of the Dan Brown books, most of the Michael Crichton books, which is in that science fiction-y, real type area, and a couple other authors that I read relatively regularly because I like the stories. And I forgot the names of the authors. I want to say it's Lincoln and Child, the two different authors. They co-write books. They have a series with this character called Pendergast, which I'm not a big fan of, but they started writing some books about this anthropologist who falls into these situations where there's crimes in the Southwest. And those, for me, there's just something about that. You could identify with the character and the fact that they're in this region that I love, right? The American Southwest.
Yeah.
But like I said, one of these days I'll get my book out on paper, and Anna said, I'll read it. So thank you, Anna. That would be great, because I'd like to have at least one reader if I ever write it. Yeah. So let's, if you don't mind, let's talk a little bit about the interpretive naturalist. Is that what it was? Interpretive naturalist?
Yeah.
And that function.
I call it that because a lot of people are like, naturalist, what does that mean? You run around in the buff? What is that? Or if you say you're an interpreter, they're like, oh, what language? No. So I combine them together, right? I loved that, going out, taking my skills of being able to not just identify bugs and trees and plants and birds. Birds were, I was a pretty hot birder for a long time, for many years. I taught about birding. I taught how to attract birds. I taught how to identify birds by songs and calls.
Wow.
That was I really was into, birding from dawn to dusk. And when you start looking at birds, I always saw everything else around me, but it really hones it in, right? Oh, well, that is a chestnutback chickadee because it's in the deciduous trees, right? So you just start combining all of it together. That helped me get those jobs. And it also helped me to teach people and children of all age, right? Everybody of all ages, about what was around them and help them with observational skills, because people do not have good observational skills. No. Birds are really good for that. And I loved it. And I loved seeing that sparkle in a child's eyes and adults when they suddenly made that connection with that tree or that bird or whatever it might be. Because I also taught myself a fair amount about ethnobotany, so I could not just tell you this. Well, and I didn't tell people what a particular tree or bird or whatever was. I would describe it or
Mhm.
make them describe it to me. And then I would tell them what it was. So you got a Western red cedar tree. Well, the Native Americans used to pound that bark to create diapers for babies, and they would strip the bark to make baskets and hats, right? It's not, and then here's how it fits into the landscape, right? It likes to have its roots. I always said its feet a little bit wet, not always, but a fair amount of the time. You hear cedar swamps and things like that. So I would make it a bigger picture thing, which was, again, it was a lot of fun. Yeah.
I do know, having traveled quite a bit over the years, that the things that you're describing, I lack in that area sometimes because I don't bird. Is that the right way of putting it? I'm not a birder. I'm also not somebody that knows a lot about trees and plants. I'm not somebody that knows a lot about animals. And, looking back, it's kind of a shame because one of the things I most enjoy are birds, plants, and animals. And having traveled so much, there's such a distinct difference from, like, Northwest New England, where I am, to the American Southwest, to the Hawaiian Islands. There's just such a broad, let alone the Pacific Northwest, which is where you are, right? Such a broad scope. And then part of it that I think is a shame is that there's a lot of kids that just never really get access to that, or very minimal, because they grow up in big cities. I remember how, and this of course is when I was an adult, how awestruck I was by the redwoods of Northern California.
Oh yeah.
It's kind of like seeing the Grand Canyon for the first time, right?
Yeah.
It's literally, and I can't think of any way else to put it, but it's literally an awe-inspiring experience. The first time you see the Grand Canyon, the first time you see a giant redwood, let alone being able to drive your car through a tree, right? Which you can do up in the northern part there. And it's just a shame that more people don't have exposure to that, because I think that knowing more about nature, whether or not you're in a city or not, can really help bring people together, because that is something that we all have in common.
Right. And we depend on it, right? We depend on those trees. We depend on a clean ocean. We depend on all these different things. The first time I was by myself, started to drive up going to the Sun Road in Glacier National Park, I had to pull over because I was in tears. I was so awestruck by the beauty of the Rockies. And mind you, I had been working in the Cascades, but the Rockies are just so rocky. They're just a whole different kind of mountain. And I'll never forget that. That was beautiful. And you're right. And people seem to be more disconnected these days from the outside world. And you can find nature in your backyard. You can find nature in the city. Maybe it's not grizzly bears and cool stuff like that, but there are some pretty fascinating things to learn about robins and dandelions and just any old thing there, the little ants, all of it. So people think it has to be in a national park, and not necessarily.
Yeah, and there's really, it seems that there's less national park than there is everything else. So I think you're right. It would behoove you to really understand your backyard, even if it is just a couple, ferns and a, whatever, right?
Yeah, or the local park.
Yeah. So, well, speaking of natural parks, national parks.
They're natural usually.
Yeah, problem is I'm drinking coffee this late in the day and I tend to get a little jittery. Yeah, national parks. So this summer I'm planning. Last year I took a trip out to the Southwest to do some camping. This year I'm going back out that way, and I'm going to, at this point, it looks like I'm going to be gone for almost 5 weeks, which is far greater than last year, right? And I plan on hitting a number of national parks in that area. Now, is that something that you enjoy doing? I mean, you mentioned the was it Cascades? You mentioned
North Cascades?
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of them just a few minutes ago, and then in your biography there was one about where you worked at as a interpretive naturalist,
Yeah.
right?
That was North Cascades National Park. I've
North
also
Cascades.
been to a whole bunch of them down in Utah,
Mhm.
Arizona, Oregon, California. I mean, I have a list that of the ones I've been to and the ones I want to go to.
Right.
Denali, I towed a small 13-foot fiberglass trailer with my dog. Where is he? Templeton,
There
all
he
the
is.
way to Denali National Park and back in Alaska. I absolutely, I'm a national park groupie or geek. I have seen they sell these little T-shirts and stuff that say National Park Geek. Yeah, I'm damn proud of it because they're amazing. There are so many, and they're all a little bit different. And I love learning about different ecosystems, experiencing different ecosystems. Right from
Right.
I've been to the Everglades to Canyonlands, the redwoods and the sequoias. It's just fascinating. There's a whole bunch I still haven't seen yet that they're on my bucket list.
Yeah, you mentioned Canyonlands, which is really interesting because throughout my entire life, I never really thought about that, even though I knew it existed.
Yeah.
But last year, I paid a visit to the northern end, the part that's up the northern end of the Moab area where Arches is located, that end of. I was so surprised, Terri, that Canyonlands is number one, freaking huge, and number two, I would argue that it's just as interesting as the Grand Canyon, if not more, because
Oh,
it's such a big area. And I remember stepping up to the edge in this parking area and just walking up and going, I think I said, "Holy poop!" It's like I was not expecting that.
yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah,
I think they all are special, right?
yeah,
In their own way. Probably my favorite is Yellowstone. I don't know if I'll
yeah.
ever go back because it's just overrun with people now. And when I went there once or twice a year for, gosh, 13, 14 years, and then in the 2000s, and
Mhm.
then now it's like overrun. So it'd be a lot harder to even travel. And I I know every time I drove into the Lamar River Valley, I felt like I was returning home. It's just such an incredible place and
Yeah.
so much wildlife there. Now there's crazy people chasing the wildlife.
Well, either that or cooking chickens in the frickin'
Oh my
Grand
God,
Prismatic or whatever. Do you hear about that?
are sticking there trying to stick their finger in it. Oh my God, what is wrong with you? There's a whole book called Death in Yellowstone National Park, and
Mhm.
there's a lot of people that die from falling in a hot spring because that
Yeah, it's
crust.
crazy stuff, I tell you. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I'm reading a book right now, similar. It's Death in the Grand Canyon that I picked up when I was there last
Oh,
year. Same
wow.
idea, where the whole book just talks about, um, people that fall off the edge because they're climbing over barriers or they're hiking in 120-degree heat. I mean, it's just the good thing about it is these books, although the subject matter sounds a bit morbid, when you're reading through them, I think you take away the message that it's okay to look, but don't be sticking your hands in there. Don't be climbing over bury. Like this book, it covers like 800 cases of people doing dumb things, So I don't want to be a statistic, Terri.
No,
Um,
me neither. I do
Not going
think
to do it.
I think there's a little Darwinism in that too.
Oh, I know. Tell me about it, right? So,
Like, really, you're gonna walk up to a mama bear? What the hell is wrong with you?
oh yeah, or what's really bad at Yellowstone, right? Are the bisons? I don't know how many times I've
Oh
seen.
man, they're more dangerous than the bears.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
and I've seen them in person, and you do not want to mess with a buffalo.
no, you need to respect them
Yeah,
a
yeah, exactly.
lot. And they've started ramming cars. They weren't doing that all the. I never heard a story of that when I was
Mhm.
going there all the time. And now you keep seeing stories of these bison ramming
Yeah,
into cars, and I'm going, I think there's a message there.
there is a distinct message. There's a distinct message.
They're tired of it. Yes.
Yeah. So, Believe it or not, we're already at 25 minutes. Can you believe
Woohoo!
that? These conversations just go by so fast. It's a shame.
We do, and they're
Um,
fun too.
yeah. So share with us, if you could, what's next for you?
Well, next is really diving into this nonprofit and trying to get it re-energized again. And also, I just joined the same program that you are in to write your own book. And starting in July, I believe, July, I'll be starting my book,
Well,
which will be fun.
congratulations on
And I
that.
have a lot more books in my head. So
Yeah,
I'm hoping, this one will be a #1 bestseller.
of course.
And then I can start getting contracts to write all these other books that are in my head. So
See, you're reading off my script now, because that's exactly what's going to happen with me.
I know, you just got to visualize, right?
Visualize, exactly.
So
Boy, that's pretty
it'll be fun.
exciting. I know, having gone through that process, and we were talking right before we got on live, and it's a lot of work. But knowing you, I mean, I don't know you super well, but I know you from the program, from Allison Roberts' program, and I
Yeah.
know that you are a very honest person, and my understanding is you have a lot to tell the world and share with the world. So again, congratulations for joining that program. And when your book comes out, I guarantee you I will buy a copy.
I
And
remember
it'll be, by the way, it'll be my purchase that moves you to the #1 bestseller.
I got to tell you, my financial planner, who is really helpful to keep me calm with money for the long term. I was telling him that I'm going to write this book, and he goes, "I'll buy the first copy." Okay.
That's amazing.
I like it.
There's nothing better than having people say, "Yeah, I'm going to buy a copy," and then they do it, as opposed to, "I'm going to buy a copy," and then they forget about it, which honestly I've done before. So
yes, and I've had that happen to me.
Yeah.
I usually follow through, but I have had that happen with the 2 books that I have already written chapters in. So
right. Well, either way, you're doing some great stuff, Terri, and you're just such an interesting person to talk to. And hopefully you'll come back on the show sometime. I'd love to catch up again. Maybe not while you're in the midst of writing.
No,
because I know how difficult it can be, but
because we have to do a speech too, right?
oh, that's right, TEDx, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I'm going to be a TEDx speaker, which is so exciting. So it isn't going to be quite as light as being a naturalist and a writer. It's going to be a pretty serious subject for you folks out there. It'll be about surviving and thriving after a traumatic grief. So, but it'll still be, there'll be humor in it, because that's who I am. You have to have, if you're going to survive this life, you got to have a sense of humor. Sometimes it's going to be a dark sense of humor, but that's how we get by when we in our darkest hours.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So
not everybody cares for that, but it's like with anything else. It's our way of making order out of chaos, and sometimes it's good to be just yourself, right? And Anna writes, "You're going to be amazing, Terri Hawke."
Thank you. You can buy the second one, Anna.
So
well, and nature too. I don't want to forget to put a plug out there for the natural world, and just even sitting out in your backyard, because that also has saved me from insanity, basically. After losing my son, moving to this amazing place called Port Townsend, Washington, has been one of the best decisions I have ever made. It's just beautiful here. It's an artsy town. I've got friends here. I have a view. That's why I keep looking. I have an incredible view of the salt water. So it's been really, really healing.
That's awesome. That's amazing. Yeah. No, I agree. And hopefully people hear that and they take a few minutes to just walk outside and just look. Sometimes it's nice just to look and see what's there, because sometimes we forget, get too busy. So cool beans. Yeah. All right. Well, Terri, thank you so much for being on the program. Again, you're welcome anytime. And as you're actually, I would encourage you to, I'll be following you on Facebook, but as you get closer for your book to be put out, I'd love to have you back on, and then we can talk about, again, how the process went, and maybe give you a little free advertising so more people are interested in purchasing, because I think your message is going to be a very, very important one.
Yeah,
So,
I hope so.
all right.
All right. Thanks, John.
You're very welcome. So before we go, folks, a couple of little announcements. Number one, I just put it at the bottom of the screen here. My book is coming out May 7th. It's called Seeking Permission, Finding the Freedom to Live Your Own Life.
Yay.
It's half memoir, half self-help. And I actually reread it recently just to see what the heck did I actually write. And I think it's got a good story, Terri. So hopefully people will grab onto that. And then, of course, speaking at TEDx, I'll be on the stage in Georgia on the 12th of May. And I believe there's still tickets available. And where you can go to check it out is TEDxLakeCharles.com. If you want to go, get your ticket, come on down. I'll talk to you in person if you want. I think that'd be great to meet you. So in the meantime, everybody, I'll see y'all next week. I plan to have one of our returning guests, Heather Doran, will be back on the show, and we're going to be talking about her book, which I think all you folks are going to find fascinating. So until next time. Thank you so very much for joining me on the Art Talk podcast, where it's my goal to bring artists together to talk about their craft. If you'd like to join me for a conversation, please reach out via email at johncoleartist@gmail.com or by visiting my website at johnrobertcole.com. So until next time, keep crafting, painting, and inspiring others with your creativity. You make more of an impact than you know. See ya.